Hollywood in the 1970s was a golden age for bold, gritty storytelling. But behind the camera, it was darker than anyone imagined. Some 70s films didn't just show crime. They were built on it. Mob ties, missing people, real weapons, and secrets buried behind the scenes. These aren't just forgotten movies. They're crime stories Hollywood tried to hide. Let's dig them up. It begins in the snow-covered streets of Grand Rapids. A conservative father's world is shattered when his teenage daughter vanishes. His search leads to the seedy corners of Los Angeles, porn theaters, peep shows, and rumors of snuff films. George C. Scott gives a chilling performance in Hardcore, but the film's darkness was more than atmosphere. Director Paul Schrader, himself raised in a deeply religious Calvinist household, claimed the story was inspired by real-life missing persons reports, particularly teenage girls who vanished from conservative homes and reappeared months later in adult film catalogs. To recreate this world, Schrader sought authenticity. He hired actual adult film workers, some with known ties to the mafia's pornography circuits, particularly in San Fernando Valley and New York. A former FBI consultant later claimed in a 2002 Frontline documentary that organized crime groups, especially the Gambino and Colombo families, were using porn production as a front for human trafficking operations during this era. Several of the consultants brought onto Hardcore went missing during or shortly after production. One woman, credited only as Tina, failed to appear for a scheduled scene. Crew assumed she'd quit. But months later, a private investigator connected to the film would state anonymously that she may have been a victim of a real trafficking ring. Police never investigated further. No charges were filed, and the movie moved on. But Schrader would later reflect, "I was writing a fiction that kept becoming a documentary. If Hardcore flirted with real-world horror, what came next was a production that practically invited it in." Sorcerer, 1977, 4 desperate men, 1 truck, a jungle trail laced with death. Sorcerer tells the story of criminals from across the world, exiled to a Latin American backwater, forced to transport crates of unstable nitroglycerin across dangerous terrain. What viewers didn't know was that the real danger wasn't in the script. Director William Friedkin, still riding high from The Exorcist, insisted on shooting in harsh, remote conditions across the Dominican Republic and Veracruz, Mexico. To secure locations and protect his crew, Friedkin allegedly made deals with local paramilitary groups. In a 1990 American cinematographer interview, crew members hinted that bribes and security payments were routine, some of it allegedly going to known cartel intermediaries. Friedkin also hired real mercenaries and smugglers to lend authenticity. One such man, known only as El Vasco, was later linked to international arms trafficking through declassified U.S. embassy cables from 1982. Another man, an explosives consultant, vanished halfway through production. He was last seen boarding a boat near the border of Honduras, a region notorious for CIA drug operations during the Cold War. 3 crew members suffered serious injuries on set. One nearly drowned in a river scene. Another contracted a parasite that left him hospitalized for months. Friedkin would later say, "That jungle didn't want us there, it fought us every day." But not every dark tale from the 70s required a jungle. Some were born in the heart of American cities, and in one case buried beneath the cobblestones of Boston. The Friends of Eddie Coyle, 1973. Robert Mitchum plays Eddie Coyle, an aging gun runner caught in a tightening vice between the feds, the mob, and his own dwindling luck. The film was praised for its realism, and that wasn't by accident. Mitchum went method. He drank with real-life criminals in South Boston. According to author George Fiv Higgins, who wrote the novel the film was based on, Mitchum would spend evenings in the company of loan sharks, illegal arms dealers, and even a mid-level enforcer in the Winter Hill Gang. One of those men, a 42-year-old named Danny T., was found shot dead execution style in a car outside Charlestown just 2 weeks into filming. The FBI was already surveilling Mitchum for previous ties to underworld figures, stemming back to the 1950s. Agents questioned the actor, but he claimed he knew nothing. No arrests were made. Rumor has it the mob was uncomfortable with how closely the movie mirrored real gun-running operations in the area. And just weeks after the murder, the studio's original promotional campaign was suddenly pulled. Whether out of fear or pressure, the film was quietly buried by its distributor. While Mitchum was mingling with gangsters in Boston, another actor, Dustin Hoffman, was collaborating with ex-convicts in Los Angeles. And what emerged was a film built on real criminal lives, Straighttime, 1978. Straighttime follows Max Dembo, a recently paroled thief trying to stay clean. But the system and his own instincts make that impossible. The film was co-written by Edward Bunker, a former bank robber and San Quentin inmate turned author. Bunker didn't just provide notes, he embedded himself in the production, and he brought with him several former cellmates. One of them, credited only as J.L. in internal call sheets, was arrested for armed robbery 3 days after principal photography ended. The weapon used in the crime? A prop gun from the film, never returned, never tracked. In a 1981 Prison Magazine interview, Bunker admitted that several burglary tools shown on screen were not replicas. They were real. Stolen goods. Evidence. Dustin Hoffman reportedly clashed with Bunker over the film's pacing, but remained quiet about the criminal involvement. Perhaps wisely, because Straighttime was not just a film about crime, it was a film built by criminals, and some of them were still working. And while Straighttime revealed the streets, our next film turned its eye inward, to institutions, to trauma, and possibly to government secrets. The Ninth Configuration, 1979. In a Gothic European castle turned secret U.S. asylum, soldiers lose their grip on reality. The Ninth Configuration, directed by William Peter Blatty, was never intended as a mainstream success. But its subject matter, a covert mental hospital for broken soldiers, drew suspicion almost immediately. Blatty insisted it was fiction. But researchers at the time noticed strange overlaps between the film's themes: mind control, hallucinations, psychological reprogramming, and declassified documents from the CIA's MK Ultra program. Funding for the movie came from obscure sources, including a defense subcontractor named Vanell Corporation, known for providing logistics consulting to the U.S. government in the Middle East. In 1986, The Village Voice ran a short piece alleging that a U.S. Army psychological warfare advisor had consulted on the script under a pseudonym. The eerie realism of the mental breakdowns depicted on screen wasn't just good writing. It may have been research. But our final story takes us home, to Texas, where a soldier returns from war and what follows is not recovery, but blood. Rolling Thunder, 1977. Major Charles Rhine comes home from Vietnam, a shell of a man. When his family is slaughtered during a home invasion, he becomes cold, calculating, something inhuman. The script, written by Paul Schrader, was based on interviews with Vietnam veterans, including one soldier whose story was so disturbing it was used almost word for word. That man's name was never made public. But in 1978 he vanished. His burnt-out car was found in Texas Hill Country. Inside, a military ID, a charred duffel bag, and a single spent shell casing. Police never made a connection. But a producer on Rolling Thunder, speaking anonymously decades later, claimed the man had been on set, watching, helping shape Ronnie's character. Whether he was real or whether he became the character, no one knows. The studio, fearing public backlash over its violent themes, quietly pulled the film from most theaters after just a few weeks. It was too real, too raw, too close. The films you've just seen weren't meant to last. They didn't top the box office. They didn't win awards. But they told stories no one else dared to. Because sometimes they weren't just stories. They were confessions, ghosts on celluloid, and warnings from the edge of art and crime. They are forgotten for a reason. And maybe that's exactly how some people wanted it.